Hello and welcome to my podcast called Innervation. Innervation was inspired by my previous podcast, Silence, where over the course of 2 years, I spoke every week with a total of 100 women from science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM. I kept all of those guests anonymous so that they could talk openly and honestly about their lives, and we discussed their experiences, what they've learned along their life journeys, and their hopes and ideas for living fulfilling and contented lives. Because their identities were always kept so safe, the conversations on Silence were always so raw and transparent, and we didn't just talk about being women in STEM, but about everything. The topics that tended to come up were the same topics that come up over and over again with my friends and family, with students who have listened to a talk in schools or colleges, or topics that I talk about with my mentees. So I thought, rather than keep them all within close circles, how about throwing them out into the world through a podcast to try and get some idea about how other people relate to these topics. So what I've done is sift through all the episodes of Silence to bring you my favourite sound bites on a particular topic, and each week on Innervation I'll be reflecting on the perspectives that came up on Silence that I feel are really pearls of wisdom that I found particularly provoking, inspiring and empowering, in the hope that they resonate with you too. This week is all about empowerment. Now, it's been 52 weeks, this is episode 52 of Innervation, and this is going to be the last episode of this particular format. I'm going to change things up again for year 2 and watch this space for a slightly different format in episode 53. But this week I wanted to end the year with, I guess, a topic that is really the ethos of innovation, which is to really get to know the self. And as a result of getting to know the self, really empower oneself. You know, there are many topics that we have discussed over the last year that I think can be real obstacles to growth and self-development. And so we've tackled those topics, but really all of it is in aid of becoming way more empowered. And I feel like by raising some of the issues that have come up, you know, about self-doubt and, you know, gosh, I mean, there's just gratitude or lack thereof, imposter syndrome. I mean, there's just been so many different topics that have come up. Uncertainty. By bringing all of those to the forefront of people's minds, we may not solve any of the problems that arise from these topics, but I think having a self-awareness is really one of the major steps towards empowerment. So I wanted to discuss the whole subject of empowerment in this last episode. And I think one of the major things that prevents people from feeling empowered is playing the victim. And most of the time, victims don't even realise they are behaving like victims, because sometimes such awful things can happen to us in our lives. And it's so shocking and creates so much trauma that, you know, we can't let it go. Like it becomes etched in our identity, these traumas, and we just end up being the victim our whole lives. And I think by being a victim, you actually become extremely disempowered, because by being a victim, you kind of stay a victim. And the minute you are victorious over any challenges or really bad experiences, that means you're on the path of empowerment, because you're not a prisoner of what's happened in the past. And this is all summed up by my guest from episode 65.
So that is playing victim. And, you know, there's something called the drama triangle. The drama triangle has victim, perpetrator, and rescuer. And certainly when you play the victim, you can move in to be perpetrator, sometimes rescuer, but you're in a position of disempowerment.
Now, I think one of the reasons why we suffer trauma and we have these bad memories is to keep ourselves safe. You know, if we put our hand in the fire and it hurts, we remember that and we remember not to put our hand in the fire again. So I think trauma and bad memories can actually be really useful. But it can also really, really weigh us down. And I think it's important for each and every one of us to decide and discern what is trauma and what can be let go of, you know, what doesn't serve us anymore. And that's really a very personal thing, as my guest from episode 61 describes.
I mean, looking back at everything I've struggled with, it hasn't been all my fault, but I definitely, if I had had the kind of empowerment and self-assurance and trusted myself rather than trusted other people, then, or trusted the wrong people, then I would have been probably better off. But, you know, you learn your lesson one way or another.
Yes.
I think it's great to be able to look back on past experiences and learn from it. I think, you know, all experiences, good and bad, can teach us something and can help us become more empowered. I think it depends on your attitude towards the trauma and, you know, one's attitude towards our experiences. You know, what is it that the universe is trying to tell us? What can we take from this lesson? You know, there's always a way of being enriched if you search for that, if you look for that, if you seek for the lessons. And I think trying to find lessons in everything is also extremely empowering. My guest from episode 20 kind of talks about empowerment as being from an economic perspective. And I guess living in the material world that we all find ourselves in, I guess it is kind of obvious that empowerment does start with financial, or at least it's very high up on the priority list. But I also do feel that empowerment is mental and spiritual as well. It's not just about being able to put a roof over your head. It's about mental health. It's about feeling comfortable in your own skin and just feeling content with being alive. But my guest from episode 20, she talks about it from a more objective point of view.
I think the key is really independence. And I think for women, the key is really economic empowerment, and that's what gives you your independence. A lot of women are tied to situations, or men, because of the financial dependence. I think we are lucky to be in this society than a lot of the other countries around the world. Women have a lot more rights. They have a lot more opportunities open to them. We're not quite like the Nordic societies, but, you know, I think we're the next best thing in this society, and we're heading in the right direction.
I mean, let's face it, empowerment comes on so many different levels. For me, my experience has been that whenever I feel empowered in one area, I then feel really weak and vulnerable in another area, and I then focus all my attention on that. So, for example, I often felt very vulnerable in work situations until I started to clock up time and experience and confidence. And once I had accumulated all those positive things and was starting to feel very empowered at work, I then started to notice a lack of empowerment in other areas, maybe relationships or in certain hobbies. And so then I'd focus my attention on becoming more empowered in those. So I think, you know, the whole subject of empowerment is extremely multi-layered and extremely complex. But I think at the root of it all, a lot of empowerment does come from the way we've been conditioned and the way we are expected to play roles, which are usually defined by society and tradition and culture. But, you know, my guest from episode 23, we end up talking about that. And I actually, when I listened to this clip, realised that I may have missed the mark that she was trying to express, which is that we shouldn't have to pander to the expectations of others, you know, because in doing so, you become extremely disempowered. Empowerment is doing exactly what it is that you feel you want to do with your life and feeling confident about that, not worrying about other people's opinions, and being brave enough to live your life with meaning and purpose. This from episode 23.
There has always been a real lack of assertiveness on the part of the women. And, you know, we tend to shy away from truly expressing how we feel or truly owning our self-doubt. And instead, we kind of take it away and suffer with it in silence. And the minute we admit that actually we're feeling a bit weak or a bit vulnerable about something, or just a little bit vulnerable about something, that actually shows a huge amount of empowerment, or it is empowering. And I think that's what I hope to try and convey through these podcasts, that it is okay to actually air your true feelings about things. Because I think women feel very pressured to hide how they really feel, or put on a front, or sort of fake it to make it in male-dominated environments. And we do ourselves a real disservice because we're being disingenuous.
Have you seen Amazon TV has a series called The Marvelous Mrs Maisel?
Mm-mm.
And in the pilot episode, it shows a woman, I think it's the 1950s. It shows kind of what the housewife looks like. And I'm bringing this up because she, you know, in her fabulous dressing gown, goes to bed next to her husband, waits for him to fall asleep, then wakes up, brushes her teeth, puts her hair in curlers, puts a kerchief over the curlers, puts the cold cream on her face so she looks like a terrible, horrific monster, and then goes to sleep. And then she wakes up early before her husband, and
Right.
she brushes her teeth and takes off the cold cream and fluffs out her hair and puts on makeup and then gets back into bed so she could just wake up like this.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. I mean,
And that's only 50 years ago, right? Or 60 years ago.
and how liberating for us if we could just walk around in the hair curlers and the cold cream. I mean, I would love women to have enough confidence and self-worth and self-belief to say, you know what? I want my hair in curlers and I want to wear the cold cream. And that's just part of the whole beauty regime. I did not wake up like this, you know? That's what I would like to achieve.
I think we're seeing some of that with celebrities posting like no makeup selfies and like leggings and sweats sort of like becoming a hip thing to wear. I hope that we're going that sort of direction. But I wanted to mention something about that sort of relatedness and belonging piece. And I mean, it's one of the core psychosocial needs that we have as humans, right? If we don't belong to the group, then we get eaten or we get sick and we die because we can't share the resources of the group. So it's so encoded in our DNA. And unfortunately, that social pressure of what women have to do in order to be valued and seen as being, you know, part of the group is really extreme and perhaps against our natural inclinations. I don't even know if we would wear curlers and cold cream without, you know, the conventional beauty standards being what they are. So
I think empowerment is inherited. You know, I often think of my own situation where the woman in generations gone past was always expected to be subordinate. And I have had to fight really hard against that because it's just not normal for people in the society I've grown up in to have women who are badass. And I guess that's what's given me my drive to help other women be badass, because I'm all for empowerment of minorities. And so yeah, I think the whole subject of empowerment is deeply complex, and sometimes I wonder whether it's something that can be achieved in a person's lifetime. And then I think, of course it is. It's all about adjusting attitude and having the strength and the courage to push through and claim your power. I really think that's down to the individual. Yes, we can exist in cultures that are so oppressive, but when I think of someone like Viktor Frankl and what he endured, empowerment is a mental construct. So I'm going to leave you with a last quote from episode 65, where she really talks about the ways that she helps herself get empowered. And I think the reason why I wanted to end on this quote is because empowerment is a very personal thing. There's no one-stop solution. I think empowerment comes from really getting to know yourself and really establishing the tools that you need to feel empowered. This from episode 65.
So I'll run through my gratitude list. Sometimes if I'm able to, I can get out into nature. So that often helps me get a better perspective. Sometimes exercising, get those endorphins in, move my body, shake it out of my body. And sometimes where it can be sitting, in being aware of where it can sit, this feeling of disempowerment or I am the victim, and the sorry state that you're in, and like, poor me, totally disempowered. So, and then you can journal. So sometimes, journaling is a great exercise as well. And it's very useful in terms of what you can uncover. So often, sometimes what I find when I journal is that I get the answer myself. So I start to parent myself like a good parent would, or like a best friend would, so rather than being, this critic and being very hard on yourself, you actually turn it around.
Be there for yourself.
Exactly. And nurture yourself. So things like those things, can help. Some people might use other mediums. Some people might draw or write or sing, or sometimes you have to go and see a therapist, to get a clearer picture and rewrite some of the stories that you're thinking. But I usually work through the gratitude first and change my state.
Yeah,
So you see, empowerment really is a very personal thing, and take the time out. That's why this subject is on innovation, because it requires time out to get to know you, to really fully understand what it is that you need in order to feel empowered. Nobody else can tell you. You have to dig deep, spend time with yourself, get comfortable with being alone, and listening to what it is that you truly need, because all the answers are not outside of you, they're within. And I pray for you that you find it for yourselves. Thank you so much for listening this week. Please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. I'd love to have your feedback about this episode or any others that you've listened to, and maybe some suggestions for future topics on this show or even future formats. It's all about self-discovery and evolution on Innervation. So be kind and loving to yourselves, and I wish you all a great week. And don't forget that next week I start with a brand new format for Innervation. So do watch this space, and thank you so much for all your support and listening for all these many years that I've been going with this podcast. Thanks a lot.